Welcome to the BMI Podcast, guys. Welcome. Today we're talking about sports gear, pretty much.
Probably another potential snake oil. Maybe it's just a nice little follow-on.
Yeah. We just did a little yarn for probably like 20, 30 minutes just before this, talking about how the health industry has a whole bunch of information out there that is just coaxing people. It's all marketing, eh? Like,
I know.
the phone is probably our worst enemy at the moment, like,
Definitely.
especially to the wallet.
Definitely. And I mean, to be fair, the devices and things that we've got too, and especially in the I was listening to something, and apparently since coming out with the Apple Watch, Apple has pretty much made it a notification and a fitness or a health watch. Like that's all it's really been. So they had no idea what they wanted to do with it when they first brought it to market.
Yeah.
Ever since bringing the Apple Watch to market, most of the major updates have been how to improve notifications
Yeah.
and how to improve health parameters.
Yeah.
And so it's just like,
Oh, 100%. They've dialed that in. I remember when it came out, they were trying to get everything like that a phony. They were trying to do it, and there was just too much. I remember being in real estate and just watching them try to fucking type out messages
so true.
just so they didn't have to walk back to their desk.
Yep.
And it was just funny to watch it. And I was just like, bro, like you're typing on this tiny ass little device. You could literally just go over to your phone and just smash that out
Yep.
in 10 seconds.
And that's literally what I was saying. It was just like when it first came to market, they didn't understand. Like they wanted it to be a bit of everything, but quickly realized that actually, fuck, we just pivot to health, pivot to fitness, and make it a notification sensor, which is literally what it is at the moment.
And I think it's good too. Like I think
Yep.
like it's good to have those metrics.
Yeah.
I've got a few questions for you because I'm interested to see what your perspective is when it comes to I guess the psyche around the health and fitness, and because you're constantly dealing with it. And I think us having an addiction to data can be a thing as well. Like I remember when I was obsessed with it. Like I needed to hit my 10,000 steps. I needed to make sure like,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like, and the sleep trackers, the amount of people like that would actually lose sleep. Ironic, right? You lose sleep over worrying about your sleep data. And it's just from having information overload all the time. It can be too consuming. And especially if you've got that nature or that type of personality where you like numbers, you like looking into that type of stuff. Um, it can get a bit overwhelming. And a lot of the times it's like actually good to take a step back and think, okay, well, what do I get from this? And does it mean anything or is this just a part of life at the moment?
yeah, because I think a lot of people don't understand like the effect it can have on your mental as well. Like especially for me, while I was trying to train for that half marathon at an hour and a half pace, like it was tough, and I was putting my body through the ringer. So then when I got to those moments where it was just like, oh, your training is going bad, like it gives you like feedback on how that went, and I was just like,
It's like a standard meme, eh? It's like
yeah.
Garmin coming back with your recovery is shit. Apple, well done, you've done another workout.
Yeah, and it's almost like kick a man while he's down. Like, you already knew in your head here, but then sometimes I would have a really good training session,
Yep.
and then it would still tell me that, and then you kind of like, and then it starts affecting you, or you think, oh shit, was it? So then you start over analyzing it.
Well, and I mean, I think one of the best metrics that we've got at our disposal, and it's one that we need to kind of calibrate over time, but it's just RPE, and that's just going back to intrinsically trying to think about how you feel and giving yourself a rating. And it can be hard when you're not used to that. So if you're not trained or you haven't trained before, you haven't trained in a while, um, you don't know what good sleep is and you don't know what bad sleep is kind of thing. Like giving yourself a, a broad score can be quite hard. But once you're calibrated and you've realized, okay, that was hard, that was easy, that was good, that was bad. We're actually very good at giving ourselves a rating of how well we're actually recovering.
Yeah.
To the point of heart rate. Like I think one of the most um, verified and calibrated metrics that we can have to heart rate is and fatigue. It's just RPE. And so you'll find if most people give themselves a score, it's basically in line with where all their fatigue metrics are at. But it's trying to use both. And so how can we use the data to kind of give us a bit of an insight? And at the same time, how can we get a little bit more intrinsic and think about, okay, how am I just feeling? Is this data, I can kind of just let it slide for now?
Yeah.
Or is this saying something that I'm feeling? And am I in line with that? So I do need to take a rest, or I do need to focus on my sleep, or whatever.
I need to check if this phone's on because my dad just tried to call me up. It didn't just cut out. So sometimes should have put it on airplane mode. That was so good. Cool. Yeah, like with the data, you just got to make sure. Yeah, you can use it, and there are some data freaks that just dive into it all. Like the things that I found handy was probably like the HRV. I tend to find that one was actually very good at sort of picking up when I was a bit off or the recovery wasn't too flash. Um, I've heard the calories. I never ever use the calories. So that's probably something we want to talk about because everyone gets a fitness tracker and then they track their steps. Steps are relatively accurate.
Yeah.
It's more along the sides of if you're trying to go, all right, Mikey did a meal plan for me. He said I can have 3,000 calories, but then I get added back in because I just done 15,000 steps today, and then it showed that I burned an extra 1,500 calories. So then you go and eat 4,500 calories. So, but that's how even MyFitnessPal adds it in. If you add in that exercise, it adds food onto your meal plan.
100%. I'll do calories first, and if you want to come back to HRV, we can come back to HRV after that. But essentially, again, it kind of comes back to that whole context around calories burnt, because a lot of it, when you're actually dealing with those calculations, and so when you're coming up with your calorie intake, how did you come up with your calorie intake? If you're only basing your calorie intake off your BMR, then 100%, I would probably eat back the calories that you're burning through exercise.
Yeah, because that's what they probably don't tell you is that like they're not subtracting off of what your normal current is, right? Like what is it?
Or TDEE,
TDE.
so total daily energy expenditure.
Yeah.
And so whenever you come up with this number typically is an estimated TDEE, which is going to be an average of the calories that you're burning throughout the day. And it's very hard to measure. That's why it's always just a guesstimate, because you essentially have to sit in this, I can't remember, it's basically a chamber that's been calibrated for the amount of oxygen and carbon dioxide in there. And so any changes is based off your heat.
Yeah.
And there's our carbon dioxide that you expend, and it's direct calorimetry or indirect calorimetry in that rate. And they're testing how much heat you're producing, which is then converted to the amount of calories you burn at rest.
Yeah.
No one's doing that unless you somehow got a metabolic chamber in your house. Oh, and so really we're just guessing, right?
Yeah.
Based on a lot of those studies, okay, these are the formulas based on body weights. If you've got body fat percentage, some of the formulas will get body fat percentage. And so we take all that into account to get BMR. But to come up with the total calorie number that everyone gets, you're also putting in how often do I exercise?
Yeah.
And so it's average. So when you have that average, you're actually putting in times your BMR by 1.5, 1.7, 2, depending on how much general activity you do. So if you're picking I exercise 5 times a week intense, it's giving you a higher 1 point on that scale. So you might be up at 1.7 instead of someone who picks sedentary at 1.2. So it's accounting for those average calories in the number that you're getting from your TDEE. And then if you're choosing gain weight or lose weight, you're selecting a deficit or a surplus based off of that calculation. And so to eat back those calories, you're essentially eating back the calories that you've already added in.
Yeah.
And again, there's nuance to that, because at a certain point, you might do, let's say, half marathon prep. Some runs are going to be easy. Some runs are going to be hard. Some Some runs are going to be easy, some runs are going to be intervals and hard, and then other runs are going to be long. And so each one of those is going to obviously burn a different calorie range. But when you're coming up with your general...
Ugh, fucking hell, Gio's calling me now. Where were we?
Where were we?
Calories.
So yeah, essentially the calculation that you've got already has that factored in. And so to eat them back, a lot of the times you're just eating back calories that you've already eaten back anyway. Um, Again, there's multiple different ways to go about it. So I remember when I was doing marathon training, I would eat back my long run calories because I was burning above and beyond what I'd normally do on a general day-to-day basis. But all my other training, I would just keep within my general calorie allowance.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's also an issue in how it measures it,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah.
it's also a guess, and so you're kind of getting an average guess based on an average guess, and so there's always going to be a huge margin of error, depending on the actual calories burned based on what's on the watch,
Yeah.
and even the general calorie burn of what's going to be burned on a day-to-day basis, which I remember listening to a podcast about as well, and they were saying that essentially with the calorie burn equation, like over time, your body just gets used to burning that calorie. So if you do, let's go say we go for a 5K run, right? We go for a 5K run now, it might say we burn, I don't know, 300 calories. It might still say in 6 months' time that we're burning the same 300 calories,
Yeah.
but your body's become more efficient.
Yeah.
And actually you might only burn 250 calories.
Yeah.
And so whenever you're looking at the numbers based on, especially based on calories, a lot of the time it's a guess.
Yeah, I think it's mainly there for people just to give you a guesstimate of where you're at, so you can sort of be shooting in the same ballpark. You want to be making sure that it's within range, right? Like a lot of people treat it as gospel, and then they're like, oh well, I get to add that in, and like sometimes I've done a workout and I push hard and it's said 750 calories. It's like it's really hard to actually burn 700. Like you have to be running like pretty much the whole time to be doing it, let alone not just doing a weight session.
Yep. I typically would look at it as what's your normal. So if you normally either go for a run or go for a swim or go to the gym, you'll be somewhere in the ballpark of 150 to probably 300 calories or so. Or if you're normal because you do 2 of those in a day,
Yeah.
ends up being 700 calories or 1,000 calories or 1,500 calories, whatever the number comes back at. What's your normal?
Yeah.
Because technically that should be factored into your total daily energy intake. So your general day-to-day eating requirements should factor in your normal training. And then I would just look at any outliers. So if there's any outliers in particular, so I don't know, if this week I had to cram all my workouts in over a certain amount of time, or it was a high volume day and I don't know, I'm peaking for a marathon or something, and I'm doing above and beyond what I would normally do, sure, probably worth eating back a few of those calories. And you can check to see, okay, how many calories roughly am I burning during a session? Did I take anything on during the session?
Yeah.
So, was I drinking Sport Drink? Was I having a gel? Take that off the number. They'll just eat back everything because you did actually eat something during that, right?
Yeah. A lot of people definitely struggle to count calories properly, right?
Which is another half of the issue.
Yeah. What is it? Someone overestimates it. Something like 70% they think it's 70%, but they're realistically missing 30%. So it'd be sauces and just all the additional things.
Yeah,
like
just
oil
that we forget.
Yeah.
Like a lot of it, we are complete. We forget. We only remember the things we want to remember.
Yeah.
And even myself, like if I look back to the weekend, I couldn't recall the weekend, and I'm relatively aware of the things that's going into my mouth. More aware than probably most people. Yeah. And I still can't remember. And so when you're looking at that, there's always going to be a bit of a discrepancy. So either I would just work it into your total daily calorie intake, check with your watch to see, or whatever tracker you're using, basically just to see whether or not it's in line with the average. And what you might actually find over time, especially if you are a very numbers-driven person, is that average over time is if that average over time is actually coming down, investigate as to why that is, because that could be, hey, you're not recovering properly. It could be an indication if last week you burnt 500 calories in a workout, but this week you only burned 400 calories in a workout. Why? Were you not able to hit that workout as hard? Are you getting more efficient, more fit, and so you have to push harder to get the same level of intensity?
Yeah.
They will be indicators, much like HRV and other metrics, but again, a lot of the time it's actually zooming out rather than zooming in. So rather than looking at, well, I need to burn 500 calories, it's more in hindsight or in retrospect. It's like, why didn't I burn 500 calories?
Yeah.
And is that a sign that, I could be doing something different, or I'm not doing something currently that's preventing me from being able to get there?
Yeah, true. Like you mentioned before, like how maybe the industry is being predatory or what? Give me a bit more insight on what you're meaning by that. Are you meaning like there's just so many products out there? Half of them
Yeah, I guess just
over
over promising. Yeah, like, I from the Apple Watch, right? Like I don't use the Apple Watch for anywhere near half the shit that other people will be using the Apple Watch for. But for the most part, if I'm buying an Apple Watch for its fitness capabilities, like I'm probably being sold snake oil.
Yeah.
Because it's limited in what it can do.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sitting on my wrist for one. So there's a lack of blood flow that already goes to the wrist in comparison to where you're exercising. So if you're trying to pick up on exercising metrics,
Yeah.
it's not exactly a heart rate strap.
Yeah.
And so, you look at even HRV. So if you're trying to get HRV data, you kind of want a ECG or ECK,
Yeah. Yeah.
basically get the electrodes on the heart
Yeah.
to measure the beats.
Yeah.
That's gold standard.
Yeah.
Okay, most of us aren't doing that unless we're in a lab doing a study of some description or just had a heart attack. The second one, which is probably close now, is the heart rate strap. So the ones that people put around their chest.
Yeah.
Those are pretty close. So they can get within a couple of beats of the EKG.
Yeah.
So it's pretty close.
Yeah.
And then you've got ones that also just go around like your limbs. So you'll actually have like almost like a heart rate strap, but for your forearm
Oh, yeah.
or for your thigh. I think there's one for your thigh as well.
Those ones, yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
That's as soon as you start getting away from the heart, anything that's not located on the heart, it's guessing.
Yeah.
Right. And so the forearm, it's a bigger muscle, bigger surface area. So you're going to get a little bit more. Same with the core.
Data thing, right? It's the crunching of numbers and from the data they pulled in, applying it to the algorithm.
Correct.
So then it can splat out something that is as close as can be.
Correct.
Yeah.
And even then, depending on how tight you've got your watch, there's movement on the watch. So it's always picking up and not picking up data at any given point in time. Now, if you're running, it's moving all the time.
Yeah, they always say like
Have it tight.
have it tighter.
Yep.
Yeah, and I always tighten it when I run.
Yeah.
Then make sure I loosen it because it's normally too tight.
Well, and so Garmin is notorious for being wrong on heart rate. So their heart rate without the straps, again, this is where it kind of comes into being slightly more buy one, you got to get the other one.
Yeah, predatory.
Yeah, it's without the heart rate strap, heart rate from a Garmin is pretty useless. It doesn't give a lot of feedback, or it's almost giving too much feedback, which then leads to you getting nothing in return because there's just too much noise there. And it's showing all the noise. And so you'll have times where you'll check your heart rate and it'll go from like resting all the way up to 150.
Yeah.
And then it'll come back down. And so it's like, well, no wonder you get a shitty recovery score because your heart rate, it shows within 2 minutes is in zone 4.
Yeah.
It's peaking.
Yeah.
And so then it takes a while for it to come back down and then it's got to try and match that. I think the difference between Garmin and Apple is Apple tend to take the outliers out. So because it's capturing shit all the time, because I think they've got a ECG built-in kind of metric into it.
I'm not sure on the old
Apple.
Apple.
Yeah. they tend to get rid of the outliers. So Apple's heart rate tends to be a little bit more accurate. Um, but again, like it's the accurate of the more inaccurates.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I hear that rings are probably the best indicator. So that's what I've seen from the data. Like I follow a few guys when I was looking at buying this watch actually, and realistic, I think it was like Oppo,
yep.
and they have a ring, and it's better for sleep data and then also for heart rate, and that became more accurate because they were testing it against I think the top of the line um, chest straps
Mm-hmm.
and just trying to compare. And yeah, I think you're right. Apple was pretty good for their accuracy.
Mm.
Um, they had struggles with I guess drop off or I guess loose drossus, which was the one where and then it wouldn't reactivate for after 10 seconds. But they're all pretty much of a muchness, right? Like when it comes to it, there are certain things. Like I got this one here, so I can track different stuff like swimming
Oh.
and the biking. That's a huge plus for different models.
Mm.
Yeah, but if I were to go the next level up, I would have to get pedals can like interlink with this, and then they all go into the app, and then that's when you start really. I think there is a market for it. Clearly,
Right.
there are people that are trying to get that 1% better, and then maybe analyzing the stuff can help you get that 1% better.
Well, and again, it's like how are you using that data? So if I'm getting heart rate or if I'm getting calories burnt or something like that, again, I'm probably not looking specifically at okay, my heart rate right now is sitting at 93 and it should be 80. I kind of don't care that much. And that's where HRV kind of comes into it.
I'm at 79.
So there you go, you're relaxed. It at that point it doesn't really matter. Um, but then again, that's where HRV comes into it. Over time, if you have a low HRV, which is heart rate variability, so how high does your heart rate get, and how low does your heart rate get? The lower that number, then basically you're one not pushing your heart hard enough in exercise to give it the stress that it needs, but then it's also not going down low enough to fully recover.
Yeah.
And so often during times of stress, when adrenaline's at play and other body systems that's going to drive heart rate up, you'll find your resting heart rate comes up. And so if your resting heart rate comes up, your heart rate variability lowers, which again, you'll often find certain times when you're getting sick or stressed out or whatever, um, your heart rate, your resting heart rate will probably go up. And so because of that, your heart rate or your HRV will be an indicative measure of, hey, my resting heart rate has actually come up. It's probably a sign of stress.
Yeah. I always notice mine. I think I've talked to you about it before. I always notice mine sort of starts to, I guess, notify me as when, yeah, the rest isn't there and I end up getting a bit sick or something like that. It almost comes before
Mm.
I would get my sickness. And I guess that is because I am lacking the rest or the recovery, like that's what's sort of dictating.
Which interestingly there, so if you look at heart rate for exercise, heart rate's always quite a lagging measure. So it's not great during exercise because often what's happening is that fatigue is setting in before heart rate's going up. And so whatever you're seeing on heart rate has kind of already happened. So it's in the future kind of thing. And you you're somewhat missing the window.
Yeah.
Or if there's changes that's occurring, you've definitely already missed it
Yeah.
by the time you've picked it up just from heart rate.
Yeah.
From HRV's perspective or a recovery perspective, it's almost the opposite way around. So heart rate will be high and then you will get sick.
Yeah.
Or then you will be like, you're already going through it, but it takes a while for your body to obviously
Yeah.
actually get to the state of either burnout or sickness or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
So heart rate ends up being an indicating measure rather than a lagging measure. But again, it's how you're using that data.
Yeah.
How are you using it?
Yeah. Well, what do you have any comments on the rings and stuff like that, or have you not
I've never
dealt with them, or
I've never used a ring itself. I personally would be skeptical.
Yeah.
For that exact reason. Like the amount of blood flow that you're going to get into your finger in comparison to the amount of blood flow that you'd even get on your forearm versus the heart rate on the chest strap, sorry. I would be skeptical as to how close, like they might have a new formulation that gets it closer to a heart rate strap.
Yeah.
There won't be better than a heart rate strap,
Yeah.
but that's only for heart rate, right? So if you
That's an option for people that don't want to be wearing a watch as
a
well.
watch,
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
correct,
And you can just slip it on when you're going to sleep or
correct.
getting, because I did look at the graphs, and all of them did have the rings are always near the top when it came for the sleep accuracy. So you do with that as you will, like I like my watch. I like having some sort of data set there available for me. It's I don't have how you is Are you using it quite often for the runs or?
I'm using it during my run,
Yeah.
and that's only because I don't have a lactate measure. So I'd love a lactate measure, but
Oh yeah,
going is pricking my finger every time I do a lap is not advantageous. So
yeah,
I don't have a lactate measure. Um, if I had one, I would probably check intensity from that perspective. But again, I think watches, fitness watches now, heart rate straps, whatever, like it's a very non-invasive, easy way to collect information, especially while running in particular. I know biking has a lot of different elements to it where you can get that data a lot easier.
yeah,
But in saying that, like for me, I do use heart rate as a gauge of intensity.
yeah,
But I'm always coming back, like, okay, if I'm giving myself this on a scale of 1 to 10, where am I sitting?
yeah,
And just trying to correlate that. Like, I know there are certain days where I'm feeling okay, but for whatever reason, let's say the heat is high and whatnot, my heart rate is going to be higher. And so if my heart rate's higher, but I'm feeling okay, I'm not pushing myself to be like, okay, I need to slow down
yeah,
or I need to speed up.
mm,
Like, as long as I'm still feeling where I need to, and I can correlate that with, okay, why is my heart rate high? I tend to be okay with that.
yeah,
So I think it's like whatever metric you're actually using, and same with sleep, right? Like, if the sleep score comes back and it says you had poor sleep, but you actually feel fine, all right, oh, whatever.
yeah,
Move on to the next day.
yeah,
Don't worry about it. But if you're kind of getting caught in the weeds of that, or like, shit, I have to walk to remain now in zone 2,
mm-hmm.
or I need to go to bed at 8 o'clock because my sleep score says I'm recovering shit or whatever.
Yeah,
And if doing so causes you more stress,
yeah.
kind of got to take a step back.
Yeah, definitely. Because I was watching my sleep score too much, and then Judith, because she's a good sleeper, she goes like, Just ignore that. Like it's probably like inaccurate or something like that." And I go, "Well, it's easy for someone who has a bloody like top of the chart. She's always in like the top 2%, like for sleep score and whatnot. It's like it's easy for you, but like I'm actually just trying to get better sleep. So I am looking at it and I go, okay." And then I also do my own analysis. I go, nah, that was at 85. I feel good. And then if I'm still feeling good later on, I go, okay, no, sweet. Like that's how I want to wake up feeling. And I'm trying to hit that as often as I can. But there's always variables and whatnot.
Yeah, and again, like it's probably worth even at that point to zoom out and just be like, okay, well, like why? Like why was it a shit sleep? Well, because I was dealing with stress of this, this, and this.
Yeah.
Or would you expect it to be good?
Yeah.
No. Like, and so it's like it's almost the byproduct of life, and it's like it's telling you the things that you already know.
Yeah.
If you intrinsically went,
If you wanted to ponder upon it.
yeah, exactly. And it's like at that point, it's like, can I do anything about it? No, because someone else fucking made me stressed.
Yeah.
So even there, it's like, okay, what does the month look like? Am I developing bad habits? Like, is it telling me that I'm always waking up at, I don't know, 3 in the morning or something? And then you think back and you're like, yeah, actually, I've had to wake up and go for a piss fucking every morning for the past week. Why? Oh, I've been sculling back water at 6 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock at night. It's like, okay, cool. Maybe if I try to get my fluid in earlier in the day, that will then prevent me from needing to wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and getting a shit sleep. It's like it started the inquiry because it was like, oh yeah, my sleep score's always shit and it's always shit because I have to wake up at 3 in the morning. Yeah. But it's like, but why did you wake up at 3 in the morning? Like you can go to bed as early as you want. If you're drinking a shit ton of water, you're always going to wake up 3 in the morning and go for a piss.
Yeah.
And so why? And in doing so, okay, now we can infer from that data. And again, sometimes I've got a lot on my plate. I'm thinking about a whole heap of shit. How long is this going to work? Go for it. It's like, okay, how can I best manage my energy? I'm getting shit sleep at the moment.
Yeah.
How can I best manage my energy during the day? Do I need to allow for time to have a nap? Do I need to allow for time in the day where I can kind of regenerate, either go to the gym or go for a walk or something that you do to regenerate,
Yeah.
right? Like, how can I best leverage my energy during the day because I'm getting shit sleep and I know that I'm going to be getting shit sleep for X period of time.
Mm.
And I'm kind of just taking it on the chin. It's like when I go out and eat a bag of chips, right? Like, I'm taking the fucking calories on my own, kid. Like, I know I'm having the fucking calories. I'm just going to take it on the chin.
Yeah.
Same with the sleep, especially like,
Yeah, I'm like that all the time. I will always just be like, okay, well, especially with some early mornings when I have the coffee cup, it just is what it is.
new parents.
Yeah.
So you're gonna have fucking shit sleep. You try optimize it.
Yeah.
Like, good luck. And it's like, okay, cool. What can I do outside of that
Yeah.
to try and improve my recovery?
Figure out those little areas you can fit those naps in or whatnot. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, I'm real interested to get I want to try and bring more questions into our podcast. So I reckon if we maybe leave it at that because we've got somewhere to be, and we'll try and pull in some questions from people. So if you guys got any questions on things that you maybe had any questions with with the apps or anything on watch, even we might even be able to dive into it a bit further. I think we touched on a few of the key ones. But there's a lot to extract from our watches and then even just on our phones within those apps as well.
For sure.
And even just navigating that, like if you got any questions for those or any health and fitness type questions, we would love to get them so then we can answer them here and then just try and get a better understanding, like me asking you, prying, and then that's always a good way to have those conversations so people can get a better understanding on things.
Get involved based on what's important.
Yeah.
100%.
Awesome. All right. Thanks for listening, guys.
Leave there.
Cheers. See ya.